Israeli aircraft have carried out dozens more airstrikes on Gaza in the early hours of Monday as the conflict enters its second week. It comes hours after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected international appeals for a ceasefire. Officials in Gaza said that nearly 200 Palestinians had been killed in the past week. 10 Israelis died in rocket attacks launched from Gaza. Well, a series of attacks early on Monday rocked Gaza City for 10 minutes, covering a broader area than the raids 24 hours earlier, in which 42 Palestinians were killed. One local resident we spoke to said he had never seen strikes of this magnitude. The Israeli military said it had destroyed 15 kilometres of tunnels used by Hamas. It also said Israeli aircraft had hit the homes of 9 Hamas commanders. Meanwhile, more rockets were fired from Gaza at the Israeli cities of Beersheba and Ashkelon. No word yet, though, on casualties on either side in these latest attacks. I spoke to our diplomatic correspondent in Jerusalem, Paul Adams, and asked if there had been any let-up this morning from either side.
No, Lucy, in a word. More rockets fired at Israel, about an hour or so ago, fired at Ashkelon and some other towns in the south. No reports of significant damage or casualties. And we are, as you say, still waiting to get some indication of the damage caused by the Israeli airstrikes on Gaza overnight, which clearly were very substantial indeed. I think this is the second or third night in which we have seen really very, very intense activity, perhaps the pace of activity increasing as Israel recognises that maybe time is running short for it to be able to carry on this operation. The Israeli Defence Forces are saying in a briefing this morning that this operation will continue for the time being, that it may take a little while longer. You mentioned the tunnels that were attacked overnight. They were saying that this system, which they call the metro under Gaza, consists, they say, of hundreds of kilometres of tunnels, and they have been attacking them relentlessly for several days, not to destroy every stretch of tunnel, but to particularly target the connections, the nodes between tunnels, in an effort to make it impossible for Hamas to operate in this network. Quite interesting details about what they're doing, and also no sign that it's going to come to an end anytime soon.
Paul, Antonio Guterres calling for an end to what he calls utterly appalling violence. I mean, where are we at in terms of the diplomacy?
Well, there's a lot of it going on, but no discernible results so far. An American envoy has been here since Friday. He has met Israeli officials. He's met Israeli Arab leaders because, let's not forget, we had several quite shocking violence on the streets of Israel between Jews and Arabs. And he has met Palestinian leaders. There is also the involvement of the UN with their coordinator here in Jerusalem. He is also conducting quite a lot of discussions. One thing worth remembering about this is that it's complicated by the fact that because the United States regards Hamas as a terrorist organization, as do many other countries, it has no direct contact. So it has to rely on mediation involving other parties. Egypt and Qatar are both involved in those conversations, but so far to no obvious avail.
Paul Adams there. I'm joined now by Belle True, the Independent's Middle East correspondent in Jerusalem. Belle, lovely to see you. I know you've been speaking to colleagues and to others in Gaza today. What have they been telling you?
Well, they said that last night was pretty ferocious once again. I got a message from one of them at about 2 o'clock this morning saying that he had counted about 50 airstrikes in less than 10 minutes. A lot of them are cowering at home with their children. Again, it's a reminder that in Gaza, they don't have bomb shelters. They don't have a system like the Iron Dome. And they don't have any early warning sirens. Although the Israeli military say that they do often warn buildings, especially high-rise buildings, before they hit them. In these kinds of intense levels of bombardment, as we had earlier this morning, those warning systems are not put in place. So for many of the civilians, they don't know where these things, they don't know what the targets are. They don't know where it's going to land, and so they're sort of cowering in their homes. But as your correspondent said there, it looks like there wasn't as high a death toll as we had on Friday morning, which was the highest death toll in this week-long offensive.
Belle, we're hearing really heartbreaking stories on both sides. I know you've spoken to a father who lost his entire family, and it seems like a miracle, except for his little baby boy.
Absolutely. It was a strike that hit during that really bad night, so sort of it was Friday morning that took out an entire home. There were two families in there, actually, part of one larger family. His wife and four children were in that building. The entire building came down, and we thought that all 11 of them were killed, which is two women and the rest children. But rescuers were able to bring out from the rubble a 5-month-old baby called Omar. The father hadn't been in the house that night. He said his wife had gone to have dinner with her sister-in-law for Eid, because this is, a religious holiday that's taking place at the moment, despite the war. She stayed the night with her sister-in-law, and that proved to be a fatal decision. But his baby was pulled out miraculously alive and is now being treated in Gaza's larger hospital, Al-Shifa. But he, of course, is absolutely heartbroken. He said to me his entire family was wiped out in an instant, and he didn't know why his family was targeted. He said their children, there were women, they've never fired rockets. They were in their special clothes for Eid, having dinner together when it happened.
It is a miracle that the baby survived. And you mentioned, Belle, he's being treated at the largest hospital in Gaza. We are hearing that 2 senior doctors have been killed in some airstrikes as well. How have the medical services in Gaza been impacted by all of this?
Well, I was speaking actually to a spokesperson yesterday for Médecins Sans Frontières, who run a clinic for burns units supporting Al-Shifa Hospital, which is, as I said, is the largest hospital in Gaza. They said indirect fire destroyed their entire sterilization unit. They said that their staffers, it was too unsafe for them to move around, were stuck at home. It was massively impeding their ability to be able to treat the wounded. This is the case across the Strip, actually. The Gaza Health Ministry said that several different medical clinics and hospitals had been hit, not by direct fire, I will make that clear, but by indirect fire. And at the same time, as you mentioned, 2 senior doctors were killed in their homes. One of them, Gaza's only neurologist, who was killed with his 5 children. In a massive bombardment on his streets. In addition to that, I've heard reports from medics, both international and Palestinian, on the ground, that the roads surrounding Al-Shifa Hospital, which is, as I said, Gaza's largest hospital, have been hit, which has made it very hard for ambulances to be able to get access to the medical centre, and made it very hard for medics to be able to bring the wounded in. So it's very, very difficult at the moment for them to be able to treat the wounded. And they say, this could mean that the death toll is actually higher than it needs to be.
And what is happening, Belle, in terms of other infrastructure in Gaza? What are you hearing about the damage done to things like power lines, and what could potentially happen to fuel and water supplies as well?
Well, I was actually just speaking to Palestinian officials yesterday about the fuel issue. Now, Gaza already suffers from massive electrical power outages. At the moment, there's only 4 hours of power a day for those families that actually have access to the grid. So there's also places where they have no power whatsoever. And that is because Gaza is running off one of only 4 turbines left of its power plant. And according to their statistics, their fuel will run out basically tomorrow, which means that one turbine will stop working completely. There is some power lines coming from Israel, but they've been severely impacted. It's only operating at about a third of the powers it normally would have, because several lines have been hit by the fighting. There is some confusion over who's responsible for that. So the Israelis have said, or Israeli security officials have said, that rockets that have not made it over the border are responsible for targeting those lines, whereas the Palestinians say it's the airstrikes. But either way, the same outcome is going to happen, which is that people across the Strip, which is only 40 kilometers long, but home to 2 million, will not have any power. That will impact hospitals, who will have difficulty trying to run their ICU units, their ventilators, and the water supply, because water pumps will not be working. So we're talking about humanitarian crises over humanitarian crises at an incredibly difficult time for the population of Gaza.
Belle, thank you for joining us. Belle True, the Independent's Middle East correspondent in Jerusalem.